All right, so this assignment may be a pretty difficult assignment in the beginning, but it's also one of the best assignments. Now, in the past, you've used CodingNighter, and so far you've used a lot of the libraries in Express to work together with your code. Now, the tendency that could happen if you just start using a lot of other people's libraries and frameworks is that you may become too reliant. And if you need to build something, you feel like you have to go search on Google for everything and look for either a tutorial or a framework. And I think that is a dangerous behavior, especially for good developers, because it makes you too reliant on other people's code. So good developers will not only know how to use other people's code, but they have the confidence that, hey, look, I can create any frameworks or libraries, just like how others have created them and how I've used some of these other libraries. They have the confidence that they can create it. So this particular assignment is designed, and it's difficult, but it's designed to have you get familiar with how you can actually create a framework like CodeIgniter for PHP, but now you're using Node.js, but how you can create those frameworks from scratch. And once you kind of figure that out, it's not that hard. And once you figure out how you can create your own folder structure, connect this file in this folder with this file in another folder, you're gonna learn and gain confidence that, hey, look, I can also create these modules and libraries and frameworks from scratch too. It's not that hard. Again, everything just boils down to fundamentals, the fundamental building blocks. And now that you're learning classes, you just need to learn how to create folders and create classes within each of the folder and to connect these apps together. I've now taught so many students, thousands and thousands of students directly, and some of the best students who are now some of the best developers and working as senior software engineers in a lot of these companies, I had them do exactly this assignment, and it gave them a lot of confidence where they actually had to build a framework, an MVC framework from scratch. And now there are many ways to do this, right? Just like imagine this. If I give you a lot of photos to organize and say, create whatever folders you want to organize these photos, you can imagine how not everyone's going to come up with the same folder structure, right? You're all going to come up with different folder structures to organize your photos. So same thing, even if you're doing this in an MVC way, and there are certain rules, right? We want to have the models folder, we want to have the controllers folder, we want to have the views folder. So there are some rules there, and each of the controller needs to be in the controllers folder and so forth. But there are other things that you can do to make this as complex as you want or as simple as you want. What I would recommend is for the beginning assignments that you're going to do, make your Express MVC, but make it as simple as possible. Don't go in and create so many folder structure to make it so complicated, right? So yes, okay, so maybe you could have, instead of a config.js file, maybe you can have a config folder, and within it, maybe you can have multiple sub-configuration. Maybe to configure your database, one to configure your session, one to configure your Redis. But that might be an overkill, especially when the project is really small. So my recommendation is follow the initial folder structure that I've outlined below the video. Just make it work, have a single routes.js, and yes, if your application gets really complex, maybe you, instead of having a single routes.js file, maybe you want to now have a routes folder. And within the routes folder, maybe you have a lot of different sub-routing files, right? Because you have so many URL, and you don't want to put, for example, thousands of URL in a single file. But now you're going to build something very simple, and you're going to make things that are a little bit more complex and a little bit more complex. So as a starting point, follow the folder structure that I've outlined, a single config.js, a single routes.js, and just create a models folder, controllers folder. And initially, you're probably not going to create any models because until you get familiar with some of the other things, Then I'm gonna have you then do the models. So just kind of lay out the structure, but think about, okay, how would I do this using classes? Use ES6, don't use ES5 when create classes. And then also, some of the libraries, you may be using promises, it may be using callbacks, it may be using async and await. I would say use callbacks if possible. If not, use async and await. But if possible, try to avoid using modules that do things with promises. You could if that's the only module available, but if there is a module that supports just callback or async and await, I think that's a better route to go. So anyway, have that in mind. You can do this. In the beginning, you may be like, okay, I don't know how to make my own framework, but it's not that hard. It's just like your OOP assignments where you create some folders and import, some of these modules and connect. It's not that hard, but my recommendation as you do this assignment is really, try to have fun, try to understand what goes behind. You will understand how it's like to create a framework like Express, how to create a framework like CodeIgniter. It's just all fundamental building blocks in OOP. It's not that hard. It doesn't have to be that hard. But after you do this assignment, you're going to better appreciate how everything is done. You will have a deeper insight on what's happening behind the scene. And you're not going to be so reliant on other people's modules and frameworks. For example, instead of spending 1 week trying to find how to do something using other people's code or libraries or frameworks, you may be like, you know what? Okay, I looked at some of these modules, but hey, documentation is not that good. Let me just create my own module or library. And that confidence will go a long way. Now, here's a word of caution. Okay, remember that I told you just follow the folder structure and the file structure I've laid out in the beginning. Okay, and for simple apps, that's fine. When your application gets more complex, as I talked about, you may want to break it down even further. What you used to have in a single file, maybe you want to break it into multiple files and create a folder to host that multiple files. So here's a danger too. Just like, imagine this, if I give you 100 photos and tell you to organize, some may organize it using 10 folders and organize those 100 photos using those 10 folders. You can imagine how someone could create 20,000 folders to organize 100 photos. That probably is an overkill, right? So same thing with these classes and frameworks. You can go overboard with OOP and you can create bunch of folders, bunch of files for organizing 10 features. And yes, your code is very modular. You have this beautiful inheritance system, beautiful folder structure. It's designed to scale, but hey, you only have 10 features. So imagine a developer who jumps in. Now they have to navigate through hundreds of folders and hundreds of files just to work on 10 feature. They're going to be thinking, what is this? This is an overkill, right? Okay, so you need to find this balance on how many folders to create, and you got to think about efficiency. I remember back in my early days, for one of my startup, I had a developer who went overboard. He created classes for everything and had everything inherit from like a generic class, and then it went on and on and on. And to work on a single feature, I had to navigate through maybe 20 to 30 different files just to work on one tiny feature. And it was annoying. Why would I have to open 20, 30 different files just to work on this simple feature? It made development really long. I hated it. And yes, someone may have given him a high five for organizing his code and following the OOP principles and creating all these folder structures. But in terms of efficiency, it just wasn't good, right? So you shouldn't also make that same mistake. For, again, some of the simple apps that you're going to be building, make it simple. Don't have so many different files that you have to navigate. Yes, you can have a single config.js. Yes, you can have a single routes.js for now. Once that config file gets really long, once that routes.js gets really long, hey, then you can split it again, right? Same thing with the controllers and models. Just be just make it simple in the beginning, and later you will find that if your controller or model now has 20 or 50 different, well, 20 functions is fine, 20 methods is fine, but if it has hundreds of methods, hey, maybe that's too many functions in a class, and maybe you want to split that into multiple classes. But for right now, keep things very simple. Try to understand what happens behind the scene, understand how you can create multiple classes and have them connect and work in harmony. This is really to help you understand how MVC frameworks work. It's so important. MVC has kind of become the de facto standard on how to create web application, and this is a good opportunity for you to really understand what happens behind the scene. And once you create this MVC framework, this is your own, and you can name it whatever you want. You can put it on GitHub, you can share it with other developers, and that's exactly what happened with a bunch of Express frameworks, Node.js frameworks. For example, Adonis.js is a framework that was built on top of Express, where someone just did exactly what I'm having you do. They took Express, they created a bunch of folders, and they did things, and they called it Adonis. And so good developer can create a framework like this in a day. It's not that hard. And this explains why every day there are all these new frameworks and libraries. Again, mediocre average developers panic. They're like, oh my goodness, there's so many frameworks and libraries that I need to study. That's average developer. A good developer will be like, you know what? There are all these things that are created, and I too can create my own framework if I want to. And they do not let themselves get overwhelmed by all these new frameworks that are introduced, because again, they have the confidence that they can also do that too. For you to build that confidence may take a little bit of time. You may need to collaborate with other people taking this course with you to collaborate. But again, keep it simple as possible when your application is simple for now. And then later when you do the user dashboard, then maybe you can make it a little bit, you can split a single file into multiple files and put those multiple files in a new folder. But again, keep it simple, relax, you can do this. I've given some hints below, just one tiny hint that is still meaningful, but I'm not going to give any other hints, because I think in the process of trying to figure these things out on your own, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge, and over time, you will get more confidence. Okay, so good luck doing this, and just enjoy the learning journey. Okay, all right, good luck.